Peace, peace. This your host, Selah Shalom, and this is the Cosmon Teachings in the words of Jehovah and his angel ambassadors from the Cosmon Bible Owaspi. And the topic of discussion today is called the story of Moses. As I revealed in a documentary Who Was Moses, that Moses was Amenemhet IV, and his stepfather was Amenemhet III, and his half-sister who found him was Sobek Nephru. These are the three people I will be applying to this story, as Moses, his stepfather, and his half-sister. The preparation for the Exodus took 5 years, from around 1550 BC to around 1546 BC. These were the years Yahweh calls on Moses, so all what I'm about to read took place within these 5 years. Now here are the masters of generations, the genealogy down to Moses' birth. Now the masters of generations are the angels that I described in the introduction to the 24th arc cycle, whose responsibility is the raising of prophets. Now, Book of the Ark of Bond, chapter 13, verse 11 through 1, it states, verse 1, God commanded his Lu'is, which are the masters of generations, in the high heavens, saying, Descend ye to the earth, to the land of Egypt, and raise me up a son capable of my voice. Verse 2, the angels descended as commanded and searched over the land of Egypt and in the adjoining countries, examining into the flesh and the souls of men. And they called unto God, saying, The land of Egypt is overran with spirits of darkness, and mortals have attained to see them, and they dwell together as one people, angels and mortals. Verse 3, God said, Go ye amongst my chosen, until ye have find a man capable of understanding between truth and fable. Him inspire ye to an iron woman for my voice. Verse 4, in Elekas the Lu'is found a man, Baksa, a Phoenician, a Phaethus, born a Suez. And Suez is a person who has the ability to hear and see angels. And they said unto him, Why art thou alone in the world? Baksa said, Alice, my eyes have never seen God. My ears never heard him. I am searching for God in the life of a recluse. Verse 5, the Lu'is, perceiving what manner of man he was, and they led him to take an iron woman to wife, and she bore him a son, Hasumat. Verse 6, the Lu'is guarded Hasumat till he was grown, and they spoke to him, trying him also as to his power to distinguish angel voices. Verse 7, him they also inspired to take an iron woman to wife, and she bore a son, Sakabal, who was guarded in the same way, and the angels inspired Sakabal to marry Tiratha of the line, in parentheses, house of Zed. Tiratha bore a daughter who was named Edamas, and Edamas bore a son by an iron father without marriage, and she called his name Levi, signifying joined together, because his toes were not separated on the right foot, nor the fingers separated on the right hand. And Levi grew to be a large man, larger than 2 large men. Verse 8, Levi, being the 4th birth of iron blood, was not acknowledged and heir of the chosen race, the Phaethus. Therefore Levi established a new line, which was called the house of Levi. Verse 9, Levi, not being eligible to a Phaethus wife, was inspired by the Lu'is to take an iron Metasia to wife. Metasia bore him a son, Kohath, who at maturity was admitted to the order of Avah, the 3rd degree of Phaethus, whereupon he was circumcised and afterward called an Israelite, the name given to the Phaethus of Egypt. Verse 10, Kohath took a wife, Marah, a devout worshipper of Jehovah. Marah bore him a son, Amram, who took to wife Yochbed, sister-in-law to Kohath, and she bore him a son who was Moses. Verse 11, before Moses' birth, the Lu'is, masters of generations, perceived that he would be capable of the Father's voice, and they called unto God, saying, In the next generation, behold, thy son will be born. Book of the Ark of Bond, chapter 14, verse 1 through 7, it states, In these days in Egypt there were houses of records, where the affairs of the state and of the king and governors were recorded, and there were recorded also the births and marriages and deaths of people. Verse 2, the language of the learned were Phoenician and Persian, but the native language were Egyptian, Arabic, and Ustian, and Simes. The times by the learned gave 2 sons to a year, but the times of the tribes of Ustia gave only 6 months to a year. Accordingly, in the land of Egypt, what was 1 year with the learned was 2 years with the Ustians and Semesians. I guess these were some of the various tribes that was in there outside of just the Hebrews. Verse 3, God said, My people shall reckon their times according to the place and the people where they dwell. And they did this. Hence, even the tribes of Israel had 2 calendars of time, the long and the short. Verse 4. 2 events of prophecy there was also another calendar called the Adi, signifying sky time, or heavenly times. 1 Adi was equivalent to 11 long years. 3 Adis, 1 spell signifying a generation. 11 spells, 1 tough. Thutmose, the learned man and builder of the Great Pyramid, had said, as a diameter is to a circle, and as a circle is to a diameter, so are the rules of the seasons of the earth. For the heat, or the cold, or the drought, or the wet, no matter the sum, 1 11 years is equivalent to the sum of another 11 years. 1 spell is equivalent to the next 11th spell, and 1 cycle matches every 11th cycle. Whoever will apply these rules to the earth shall truly prophesy as to drought and famine and pestilence, except wherein man contraveneth by draining or irrigation. And if he apply himself to find the light and darkness of the earth, these rules are sufficient. For as there are 363 years in 1 tough, so are there 363 days in 1 year, besides the 2 days and a quarter when the sun stands still on the north and south lines. So here is just a briefing of how the Egyptians and surrounding tribes within Egypt kept time. So right here it just shows you that it wasn't no just one calendar that these people were following. Each area had their way of reckoning and counting time. Verse 5. In consequence of these 3 calendars, the records of Egypt were in confusion. The prophecies and genealogies of man became worthless. And as to measurements, some were by 3s, some were by 10s, and some were by 12s. And because of the number of languages, the measurements became confounded. So with all the great learning of the Egyptians, and with all the care bestowed on the houses of records, they became even themselves the greatest confounding element of all. Verse 6. Jehovah said, for 2,000 years I gave my enemies a loose rein, and they have the longest line of kings in all the world, and yet in the midst of their prosperity they fall down like a drunken man, even their language is becoming like a pearl that is lost in a mire. Verse 7. Jehovah said, because the kings of Egypt have outlawed my people and denied them the right to obtain great learning, behold, my people are divided also. 1 tribe hath 1 speech, another tribe another speech, and so on, till they cannot understand one another, except in fact in their rites and signs and passwords. So here is showing you the confusion that was going on as far as the different tribes, the different languages. No different than you see today in certain countries like India, where you have a multitude of languages, and likewise with Africa, where you have a multitude of languages, and it's hard to communicate when every village and tribe you go to have another language, and especially if you're not aware on how to speak that language. So these same things were going on in the ancient times. Now here are the Egyptian laws of the land, and here you will see how the Israelites were outlawed. Book of the Ark of Bond, chapter 14, verse 8 through 19, it states, verse 8, yeah, the kings had perceived that to keep my people in ignorance is to keep them forever in bondage. But I will raise up a leader, Moses, amongst my chosen, and I will send him even into the house of the king. And the king shall give him great learning. He shall master all languages and be capable of speaking with all my people. So here Jehovah already had this plan beforehand that he was going to raise the Hebrew child up in the house of Pharaoh. Verse 9. Because the Israelites worship not the gods and the lords, but the Great Spirit only, and because they resent not injury done by another, they had been limited into servitude by the Egyptian laws, which had stood for 1,500 years. These laws were called the sun laws, after the manner of the division of the Osirian system, which was, verse 10, the sun is a central power. Its accompanied planets are satellites. In like manner, the king of Egypt was the sun king, and his sub-kings, governors, were satellites. Osiris, the highest angel in heaven, was the sun god, that is, god of gods, for all other gods were his satellite. He revealed certain laws to mortals, and these were the sun laws, and all minor laws were satellites. A sun law extended over all of Egypt, but a satellite law pertained to the minor affairs of a city or province. But it must be confirmed to the sun laws. For in those days the spirits of darkness taught that the sun once whirled so fast it cast off its outer extreme, and so made the earth and moon and stars, and this was the accepted philosophy of the learned Egyptians of that period. Because the world ran in circles, orbits, the circle was the highest measure, or sun measure, and the diameter of the circle was called the Adi, a Phoenician word signifying short measure, and this name Adi was applied to the Israelites in satire, as the Anglo-Saxon word adios is used to this day. But the Israelites made sweet songs and called them Adis also. Verse 11. Amongst the sun laws were the following, to wit, the God of gods, Osiris decreed, whoso boweth not down to me shall not partake of me. Behold, mine is the sign of the circle. My enemy shall not perceive great learning. Verse 12. They shall not hold sun places, which is employment, but as servants only all their lives, and their sign shall discover them. So the dress code would be the sign of your servitude. Verse 13, if they worship not me, but the Great Spirit. Verse 14, if they deny that the Creator is in the image of a man. Verse 15, if they circumcise and will not serve as soldiers. Verse 16, then their possessions are fortified already, nor shall they possess a house in their own names, nor send their children to the schools, for they shall be servants and the servants of servants forever. Verse 17, under the Egyptian laws it was accounted a sufficient crime of adultery to worship the Great Spirit, Jehovah, that the Israelites were not even admitted to the courts to be tried for an offense, but fell under the jurisdiction of the master for whom they labored, and his judgment were unappeasable. So here, these Egyptian laws is damn near equivalent to when we came to America in the slave trade and we was given servitude roles and treated like nothing. Verse 18, now at the time of the birth of Moses, there were in Egypt 13 million of inhabitants, and of these 4 million were Israelites, more or less. For amongst the Israelites, not all were of full faith, but many too shirked the rigors of the sun law, professed to be worshippers of God, Osiris, and they would also enlist as soldiers, and otherwise connive in the ways of men for sake of favor. So here it states some of the Israelites took part in the governorship of Kemet, and you can see this within the second intermediate period where you had so-called Hyksos rulers ruling in Lower Kemet. Verse 19, for which reason the Sun King, Pharaoh, feared the time might come when the Israelites might revolt against the sun laws or become soldiers and confederate with foreign kingdoms for the overthrow of the Egyptian dynasty. So during the second intermediate period, you had many nomes with their own ruling pharaohs. The 13th through the 17th dynasty ran concurrent with the Middle Kingdom. So that 230 years got to be subtracted from that intermediate period and placed within the Middle Kingdom. Now here's the reason why there was a migration into Kemet. Book of the Ark of Bond, chapter 14, verse 20 and 21, it states, verse 20, for more than 300 years the god Baal and the goddess Ashtaroth had driven the foreign kingdoms to war, and in consequence of these wars the faithists had fled into Egypt and even accepted servitude rather than to be slain elsewhere. Verse 21, Jehovah had said, behold, my enemies in killing one another frighten off my chosen. Now will I lead them into Egypt together and give unto them a great leader, and he shall restore my doctrine unto them, and I will afterward deliver them into the lands of their own. So here it states why there was a migration into Kemet in the first place. Because of the wars between Baal and Ashtaroth in the regions of northern Mesopotamia, Syria, and somewhat of Europe. And I explained these wars in the vids called the Triangular Wars of Osiris, Baal, and Ashtaroth. And you can see through those wars how it would have caused a migration coming into Egypt. Now here it describes the pyramids during the time of Moses. Book of the Ark of Bond, chapter 15, verse 1, it states, verse 1, the king's palace and pyramid were surrounded by a wall of stone, with 12 gates made of wood and iron. The wall was of sufficient breadth for 12 men to walk abreast thereon, and the height of the wall was equivalent to 12 squares. On the summit of the wall were 12 houses for the accommodation of the soldiers who patrol the walls, and in each and every gateway were houses for the keepers of the gates, so that no man, nor woman, nor child could come into the palace or palace grounds without permission. So they saying right here that the four corners of the palace ground was well guarded, so you just couldn't walk in and out without getting stopped by one of the guards. So keep that in mind. Now here's where Moses is found in a basket and the Pharaoh decreed the infant's death. Book of the Ark of Bond, chapter 15, verse 2 through 5, it states, "And it came to pass when Leotonis, the king's daughter, walked near the river, accompanied by her maids, she beheld a child in a basket amongst the bulrushes. Leotonis commanded her maids to fetch it to her. And when she looked upon it and beheld it was an Israelitish child, she said, The gods have sent him to me, and he shall be my child." Now the daughter of Pharaoh named Leotonis would be equivalent to Sobek-Nephru, the daughter of Amenemhet III. And the gods that she's referring to would be the god Hapi, the river Nile god. Verse 13.